So I'm delighted to be with my friends Jim Huerth and Knutson, who are veteran bankers. They've worked in both regional and community banks. They've managed groups in various sectors, commercial, wealth, capital markets. They went on to lead community banks. And they've been engaged with me over the last several months in a conversation that started with a concern that I had, which was based on the fact that as you look at the business customers in America, a very high percentage of them, some estimate as many as 70% of them, are anticipating transitioning their businesses in the next decade. And as I started to talk to Jim and then Kurt about this, I started to sense that there was something to this. I remember talking to a CEO of a community bank in the upper Midwest recently, and I said, are bankers doing a good job with this? And he thought for a second and he said, yes, there are bankers who do a good job with this, but very few banks do a good job. So part of what Jim and Kurt and I are going to talk a little bit about is this challenge facing CEOs and their management teams on how to retain business customers, how to retain them over the course of their life cycles, how to find new business customers by focusing in on this big issue, this transition issue. So Jim, you and I first started talking about the risks if community bankers don't get more proactive in working with their business customers on this. What do you see as the risks in this?
Well, thank you for asking, Ned. All of us who've been CEOs or bankers deal with risks that are definable, dealing with our audit committees and the like. What I'm talking about is the risk of not growing the revenue stream or losing the revenue stream. We all have heard and talked about deepening relationships. The unique perspective I think I bring is I've led wealth teams, I've led banking teams, and the ability to leverage the wealth group or the concept of wealth questions. What's your plan with this business 5, 10 years out? Where do you want to go? With whom do you want to do this? Those are questions that I think all of us have asked. Kurt and I certainly have asked that about our banks, but I turn that focus toward our clients. And I think there's a great deal of experiential depth, observational depth from our bankers across the country that can really help and drive that deepening of relationship, but we're not trained to do that per se. And I think that is a risk.
And it also poses a risk to bank lending portfolios if your business customers haven't prepared well for the next stages in their business. We certainly can all trot out stories about that. But let's focus a little bit, Kurt, on the upside. If we do this right, if we're really successful in engaging our business owners and helping them navigate through some of these questions that they have, not just the financial, but the personal, where can that lead?
It's a very big customer retention tool. It's also a customer acquisition tool because if you're a bank that is focused on C&I lending, if you're not having conversations with the customers that you have, there's a couple of things that could take place. One is the business goes away suddenly. So you've done your projections for the year, you built your budget, and all of a sudden somebody comes in and the business has been purchased and you weren't even aware of it. Now you've got this gap in your budget and you're trying to fill, and it's oftentimes not able to be filled within that calendar year, which creates a problem. But secondarily, you could have had an opportunity to perhaps finance the buyer. You could have had an opportunity to perhaps transition them into the wealth management area. If you have something like that, if you have fee sharing agreements with somebody, you might be able to transfer them into that relationship as well. But nobody's having these conversations with them. I've found in my past that oftentimes you raise that question with a customer, and this goes back to the bankers that are good at it versus the banks so far. The bankers that are good at it have asked those questions, and I can guarantee you the people that are listening that have done that have found that they they have 3-hour conversations about what the business owner is thinking about. The business owner doesn't have anybody to talk to about this. So if you can do that and have that conversation, you don't have to have all the answers. But if you're able to have those conversations, you're going to bring that customer relationship closer, and consequentially, you're going to be able to, or consequently, I should say, you're going to be able to take business away from other banks that are focused in CNI lending who aren't having those conversations.
Really important point, because this could be a differentiator. If your competitors aren't having these conversations with their business clients and your team approaches prospects with that mindset, it might actually open the door to some really interesting opportunities. But there are some strategic issues, and you both have hinted at them. Jim, I'm curious, when you think about the issues that a CEO might face, he or she's thinking about getting more serious about this. What would you put as some of the priorities that that bank management really has to come to grips with?
Well, we all talk about selling and client acquisition, but am I doing things to actually get there? Am I helping my team members to grow? In the current environment, all of us associated with community banks know the CRE concentration. Okay, but that in itself can pose problems in that where does that client relationship go strategically? If they keep acquiring and growing, they're going to grow outside of your bank. Okay. And that tends to be one dimensional. And either Carter or I could talk about that a lot, whether left side or right side of the balance sheet. Getting into the operating company environment grows both sides of the balance sheet and also really provides a unique way to introduce wealth into the conversation. And I think part of that strategic issue is deepening that conversation with the banker and client and helping to work through that helps the banker ask bigger and better questions. And when I say bigger, I'm not talking about complex. I'm talking about above the relationship. And where is this client going? With whom are they going to go down that path? In Kurt's comment, one thing I thought about was the shock value of, well, we do that. Didn't you know that? No, I didn't. And that relationship quickly leaves you. And so strategically, I think you have to address, and whether you're a great musician that practices constantly, or whether you're an athlete that deals with repetition of a pro baseball player doing nothing but taking ground balls for an hour, we as bankers also need to do that. What are some basic questions? And I think as a CEO leader, you use third parties and leverage third parties, but you yourself must change the vocabulary and must change the interaction to stress the importance of strategic. Have we had these conversations? Have we really identified the risks? One risk, and not to go deep into it, Ned, is candidly working with a client with a successful business and asking about the next generation or the next level of management. Can they do what we expect? Will they do? And as I think all of us on this conversation will know, prepare for it because it will be here sooner than later.
That's a really smart comment. And you lead into one of the things that I'm curious about, because no two community banks are the same in terms of their internal capabilities. Some have wealth embedded, some don't. But the idea of partnering, which Kurt, you hinted at, and the ability to vet partners to help a business owner, once you've helped as a banker, the business owner clarify where they want to go, what some of their priorities are, maybe rethinking some of these big issues, which can take a long time. These are not things that necessarily get resolved based on one conversation. But when you think about external parties, CPAs, estate planning attorneys, M&A advisors, how should bank management think about vetting these folks?
Yeah, it's a great point, because it does reflect on your brand. Anybody that you bring into the picture reflects on your brand, and you want to make sure your brand doesn't get sullied by it in the least. And so there's a number of different ways you can vet your partners. One of the ways that you can do it is to look at your shareholder base. Who in your shareholder base fills those roles? set good boundaries with your shareholder base if they fill those roles. We had several people that dealt in wealth management, so they all offered kind of different flavors of it. And we let them know from the get-go that we're going to have these conversations with several parties, and then it's going to be between the customer and you as to who has the best relationship and where it goes. So there's a whole host of things that can be done. There's agreements that can be entered into that um, helps offset the liability that you might be taking on in that regard. The other side of it is oftentimes it's best to set that up so that the client's paying the bank rather than the referral party. It can go differently in different circumstances. So there's a whole lot to consider there, but the number one thing you want to consider is making sure you're setting up your clients with people who are additive to your brand instead of subtracting from your brand.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think we've all appreciated as we've talked about this and done research is that there are a lot of resources that are available. Individual banks don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's some places that can help provide support when it comes to educating, both educating your bankers as well as your clients. There are organizations that have put together some really interesting approaches to marketing this kind of capability to business owners. And I think part of what we'd like to suggest, we've tried to create some resources as well. And on the Third Act Sales YouTube channel, there are a number of different conversations that we've had over the last 6 months with different players, and there'll be more coming. But we think that one of the ways that community bank CEOs and their management teams can go forward is by partnering with each other in a certain sense and learning from the experience that each organization has. And I start with the assumption that this might be a conversation that down the road would be of interest. If it is, I'd encourage you to think about reaching out to any of us, to Jim Huerth, to Kurt Knutson, to me, Ned Miller, and talk further about where this might go, because we really do think this is a great opportunity for community banks that are trying to take their organizations to the next level. So with that, any final comments? Jim, Kurt, you're my partners in this. Anything you would add?
One thing I would just add, Ned, is certainly a confession time, if you will. Having recently retired as a CEO, I know what my day was like and how broadly I would think about it the night before, but how narrow the day ended up. In other words, opportunities, challenges, problems, everything coming across your plate. That third party menu out there is extensive, and I now understand better how much positive leverage I could have gotten from that world. And certainly I would, think in terms strategically of what do we want? Do we want a simple valuation tool in the hands of our bankers to have an ability to guesstimate the value of the client's business? That would have been helpful. So we could go on, but what you just said, Ned, I think is one of the most revealing things reflecting back on my career that I would say as a recently retired CEO.
How about you?
I would just add to Jim's comments, which are very good. Earnings are what everything comes down to ultimately in the end, and protecting your client relationships that you currently have, being able to attract new relationships, being able to move those relationships along their life cycle, all comes back to earnings. And from my perspective, play offense. It's hard to make money these days. Net interest margins have been whittled down to next to nothing. We've had non-bank competitors come in and take a whole host of business. This is one area that community bank CEOs can focus on, particularly if they have a C&I emphasis, is being a bigger partner for their business relationships.
Amen to both those comments. And if we can help you in any way, do reach out to us. Again, we'll include information about how you can contact us going forward. Thanks very much for joining us, and we hope this sparks some conversation.